Hi, it's the Duchess here. You may have seen me mention the fact that I fell prey to a tiara sale. New tiara. Hope you like it. What I thought I would... Look, I know I told everybody that I was going to have a new story for you about the poison lady for my birthday. I've got a list of poisons, I've got a story, but it's turning into a novel. I'm going to turn up a story with that. At some point, I just got slammed with so many deadlines, I didn't have a chance to write an actual coherent story. So, what I thought I would do instead, for my birthday, is, you probably all know about this book. This turned up last year. It's got it's got some pretty good stories in it. And I think it's got a good high concept, which is the untranslated story that explains the untranslatable word in a different language. So what I thought I would do is, for my birthday, happy birthday to me, and my present to you, is that I would read a story from here, and I'm probably going to mangle the word that it's inspired by, and the word is, if you've seen this story, you'll know that every story has the word behind the story and the story behind the word. So, first I'm going to give you the word behind the story, which is Iktsuarpok, which is Inuit for the frustration of waiting for someone to turn up, the anticipation of constantly going outside to see if someone is coming. And the story that turned up for this is something that, and don't ask me why, because I don't know why I'm telling you this, I don't know what the reason is, but I believe the story to be inspired by Ursula Le Guin. And anyway, if you want to put it that way, I dedicate this story to her in spirit and with thanks for everything that she's done for me so far. And the story is called Black Wings Over Kelmar. Notes on the wingborne of Kelmar, Mobile Ambassador Gelman Gron Abelas. There had been some curiosity before I came here as to the appearance of the Kel. They are humanoid, but they are plumed from the top of their head all the way down their solid neck, which broadens into wide muscled shoulders and onto their backs, spilling over their shoulder and running down a feathered line diagonally across their pectoral muscles until they peter out mid-abdomen. Male and female alike wear colourful kilts, leaving this upper part of the body bare. Some Kel, of the higher social order, have a spectacular crest. It remains unclear whether it is the crest randomly obtained by genetic lottery that provides the entry into the upper social echelons, or if it is that the members of that particular class are a separate subspecies who are born with the identifying crest in place. The feathers range in colour from dowdy browns to brilliant burnt oranges and reds, and one family line which boasts plumage which is so deeply red that it begins to fold into purple and even traces of blue on some edges. Illustrated images enclosed as attachments. But these plumed and feathered creatures had no wings underneath the back feathers, not even vestigial ones hidden under cover of plumage. It was an obvious question, and we asked. There was the great reluctance to discuss the question, and we had allowed their matter to drop for the time being until I could perhaps find a better opportunity to inquire about it. I arrived in Kelmar in the spring of what they identify as their year 11432. Reference, the period which they call a year is roughly 1.75 times as long as a standard year as measured by the original Terran base unit. Our initial encounters with the Kel were borne out by my extended stay here. They are a closed and mistrustful people, and they dislike, even resent, strangers who intrude into their world. For almost 5 months after my arrival, I had almost literally gotten no further than receiving terse acknowledgments from the servants assigned to my compound. I had studied their language before I arrived, and I could make myself competently understood when I spoke it, but nobody would answer me in the same language, responding to any overtures of my own in whatever they could muster of my own language, or, if they could not come up with a vocabulary or enough of an intent, with silence. It was a lonely time, and I had begun to seriously question my presence or my usefulness in this world before I quite accidentally stumbled into a deeper layer of their society, one which they had clearly had no interest in sharing with an outsider such as myself. A winged one was born in my compound, to one of my own servants. And whether or not it was a fortunate thing to have happened, I was present in the house when the child was born. I observed the circumstances surrounding its birth, and I had questions which I insisted I find the answer to. The time for silence was at an end. They had not expected me to emerge from my quarters that late at night, and it was perhaps that which had made them err. They had been too intent on getting the newborn out from under my potential observation as quickly as they could, and they had sacrificed in their urge to haste a more adequate concealment. Thus it was that I quite clearly saw the infant they carried, and I quite clearly observed the shape of tiny wings on its back. They were intent on their task, and they did not immediately notice my presence as they hastened upwards in the spiral stair which led to the flat roof of the compound. One of them, the one bringing up the rear, turned at the last moment and saw me, and followed the others into the doorway which led into the stairwell, speaking quietly and urgently to those already inside. I had already decided to follow them, and the warning, if such, had arrived too late. I emerged onto the rooftop in their wake, and I was in time to see something that none of our inquiries had brought to light. A winged kill awaited on the roof, under the stars. I was in time to see the newborn child hurriedly handed over to the winged visitor, who carefully placed it in a pouch securely strapped across its abdomen and launched skyward, spreading immense wings which blotted out the view of the bright stars for a moment, before the creature rose high enough to diminish, and then vanish out of sight. I was aware that I may have crossed the line, and I stepped into some taboo, but they had accepted my presence there as ambassador from the coalition, and in the time that I was in Kilmar, they had learned enough of me to know that I could not permit this to pass without an explanation. It was one of the compound staff, a high-ranking crested Kiel, leading the small knot of Kiel who had made their way to the roof with the child, who made a short, sharp gesture to the others, and then lifted his big round eyes with their large golden irises to me. "I will need to find out more," I said in formal Kiel. "Yes, Ambassador," the Kiel said in his own language, communicating with me at last. "I will see to it in the morning." I did not sleep very well, very nearly not at all. In the morning I repaired to my office and waited there for the Kiel to make good on his word for the night before. When he did arrive, it was to invite me to accompany him out of the compound, and I did so on his assurance that I could expect answers at our destination. That turned out to be the last house, a dead-end alleyway off one of the streets leading from its main marketplace. It was an unremarkable enough destination, with a door in need of a good coat of paint, except for the unusual fact that the house to which this door provided entrance was higher than its neighbours, its roof out of sight from any casual watcher. That might have given me fodder for thought, but at a gentle knock the door was opened, and my Kiel guide and I stepped inside. He gestured me towards a doorway which led to a stair, much like the one in my own compound, except that this one was 2 stories high, and I was a little winded when I stepped out into the room at the top of it. I took a moment to collect myself, and in that moment the Kiel who had brought me there emerged from the room behind me, and I realized that the two of us were not alone in that room. Another Kiel stood a few paces away from the stairwell opening, a pair of brindled wings folded down along the broad back. We looked at one another in silence for a long moment. "Why did you bring her?" the winged Kiel said in their own language. "She saw," my household Kiel replied in the same tongue, "last night on the roof." "That is no reason. She could have been told not to speak of it." "She saw," my Kiel repeated with a definite tone of resignation. "This one she will not let it rest. I judged it best to let her speak to you." They clearly did not know just how much I had learned, how much I could understand. Well, but that might have proved useful, so I chose to eschew their language in favor of my own when I spoke. "So there are winged ones," I said. "We do not like to speak of it," my household Kiel said in my own language, turning to me. "Not to outsiders. This is Cadora. I have brought you here to her so she can answer the questions you must have, but this is a private matter, and we are much grieved that it has been permitted to be observed. In the light of the events of last night, however, it was considered necessary to at least prevent speculation." "When we came to your world," I began, but the Kiel lifted his hand. "We agreed to provide your coalition with an embassy and with information," he said. "But as I said, this is a private matter. In time you would have discovered the existence of the winged kind, but perhaps in a contact which would not have given you the misgivings of last night. The child is safe and unharmed. This is our way." "We have no wish to intrude," I began, but Cadora shook her head, mantling the wings a little. "You have seen, and now you have questions, and we know your kind," she said. "My kind?" "You are not the first to have come here from outside, and all outsiders are alike," she said, somewhat disconcertingly. The words were flat, inflectionless, and yet they had a certain quality to them that was at once resigned and threatening. One might have interpreted the utterance to mean that others had come, but none had stayed for long, or that their stay had been shortened by the Kiel themselves, if they judged that necessary. All at once this concession to my interest and curiosity began to feel rather more like an audition as to whether I would be permitted to stay or forced to leave, and just how much I would be permitted to divulge of what I had learned. But I would learn what I could, until such time as I was barred from learning more. This was after all why I was here. The wings, I gestured to hers. May I take a closer look? Cadora unfurled them a little, a wordless invitation, and I stepped closer. The pinions were large, well-defined, with a sharp primary feather that looked almost as though they bore honed knife edges. I regarded the wings with a certain respect after this, because if true, they could be deadly weapons. But Cadora did not threaten, just submitted patiently until I stepped back again and then met my eyes. You have questions. Are all infants born winged? Cadora shook her head. Only a few, she said. There aren't many of us bearing the wings. I have never seen any, child or grown. We do not live amongst our wingless kindred, Cadora said. As you are already aware, because you have never seen us in the open in the settlements on the ground. There is always a house for us, like this one, where 2 or 3 of us dwell in seclusion, in readiness for a winged birth like you saw last night, so that we can bear the winged child to where it now belongs. For us, they are Aries. The winged ones are taken from their dam as soon as they are born, and they are fostered and brought up there, among their own winged kind, and when they fully fledged taught to fly. You do not have contact with your families here? We do not have families here, not after we are taken from them when we are born with our wings. Our family is those who surround us in Aries. You never come down among them? We do, she said, once a year. On the last night of summer, on flight night, when we all come together, and the wingless ones take winged lovers that night. This is what you would have found out anyway in the fullness of time when the next flight night comes. This is what they always find out, the outsiders. There was a complexity here which I could not exactly unravel. The Kiel flight night rituals were not exactly hidden. If I had known to ask about it, I probably would have had my questions readily enough answered, but it was also clearly a subject on which they did not appear to wish any outsiders weigh in on or take too close a look at. It was a ritual, a festival, and a biological compulsion, an occasion that brought reverence, acceptance, and shame all at once. Is that how the winged ones arise? I asked quietly, aware I was probing what might be a forbidden spot, but I was ambassador, and asking questions was what I had been sent here to do. Sometimes that means that wings come when the child is born, Cadora said a touch unwillingly. We, winged women, we cannot bear. We are sterile, but the males can sire winged children on the fledgless, and so our numbers are maintained. But there is congress between the wingless men and the winged females. You said the wingless ones take winged lovers, both men and women? Yes, we winged females take fledgless lovers, she said, mantling her wings a little. They seem to find it exciting. And for us there is no danger because they cannot impregnate us. Do you actually fly, then? That was a stupid question to ask, and I knew as soon as I uttered it. She had spoken of Aries, after all, and of winged babies being taken there, and I had seen one of them, perhaps Cadora herself, I had no way of knowing, take flight from the embassy compound rooftop only hours before, but she seemed to understand what I really wanted to know, and answered that question instead. We can fly great distances, she said. Sometimes the fledgless seek us out and entrust us with messages or even cargo. We are strong, and we can carry a net bearing considerable weight if necessary. And we can reach the 7 archipelagos much faster than a ship can. I nodded, for this began to explain a lot of things we had not yet found answers to in this culture, to wit, how news reached the scattered archipelagos faster than we knew ships could get there. We had speculated about messenger birds, but we had simply failed to take that to its natural conclusion. In exchange, they leave us alone otherwise, Cadora continued, and we use the wings for our own purposes. A certain smile had drifted onto her features at those last words, a languor, and I thought I understood. It was crass to ask, but I was here to learn. You use the wings in pleasure, amongst yourselves? We play in the sky, she said. Out there above the open water, or deserted islands where no eyes can see. Oh, it is glorious to love in the sky. But they could not conceive their own children, their own winged children, so they sired them on the, what did she call them, the fledgless? It was unexpectedly complicated. I asked questions which might have sounded stupid and ignorant, but I knew nothing, and I wanted to find out as much as I could before Cadora became disinclined to speak further. What are your own lives like? Do you form groups, families? How are the new winged creatures raised? Every area is its own family, Cadora said patiently enough. We get sorted by appearance. All wings are indeterminate until the adult primaries come in, when the child is 10, 11 years old. And then the color of the primaries determines if that child stays within the area which had raised it or moves to one which matches its colorings. I indicated her own wings. Yours? She mantled them again. I found it almost hypnotic to watch them quiver ever so slightly as she stood there as though she was keeping them from flashing open and taking her away by main force of will. "I am of the brown Eyrie," she said. "I am second molt of the brown Eyrie. To the south of us, in the archipelagos, there is the red Eyrie and the amber Eyrie, and then others. And then there's the furthest one north, the white Eyrie." "The white Eyrie," I repeated. In my mind, iconic images had begun to emerge of humanoid creatures with white wings, angelic avatars which appear to be part of the lore and mythology of almost every culture we'd almost ever encountered. I found myself wondering how deeply rooted the imagery went, and Cadora confirmed some of what I was thinking in her very next words. "They are a strange lot. They don't mix with the rest of us often. Only on flight night do we see them in any number. But they are the ones trusted with the deepest secrets, the highest honours. They do not carry cargo, nor do they carry love letters between lovers in different archipelagos or messages to ships out to sea. They fly for princes and for priests. They are their own." She paused. "And then there's—" She clamped her mouth shut on what she had been about to say, sharply, as though biting off the words she would have spoken. But I had noticed, and now, of course, I had to know. "There is another?" I probed. Cadora threw me a smouldering look. "We do not speak of it," she said. I said nothing but waited, and she finally sighed. "For some," she said, "the wings grow in black." "What happens to them?" "They fly away," Cadora said darkly. "The black Eyrie?" "They do not have an Eyrie. They are solitary. They go where they go. They do what they do, and none know where or what. And the worst of it is—" Again the pause. "But they had sent her here to give me straight up the information they knew I was going to spend my time digging for, and it was better in their eyes, maybe, to give me their truth rather than to let me learn some twisted version of it by finding it out in puzzle pieces from people who didn't know what needed to be told." "The worst of it is what?" I inquired gently, assured that sooner or later I would be told, because I would ask until I was. "The black can come in at any time, at any molt." Cadora's lips were tight, as though she was trying to spit the words out through as small a space as she could, permitting only the bare minimum required to escape. "Any one of us, at any Eyrie, can wake up one morning in the molt and see the black feathers coming in where we had been brindle or gold or even white. And if that happens, it's exile." "Twice exiled," I said. "First torn from mother's arms as babes, and then thrown out of the Eyrie families if the black feathers come. That's harsh. Why do you drive them away?" "I don't know," Cadora said, but there was fear in her eyes now. "They are different. They are dangerous. They are predators. They kill." "Have you ever known one?" "No, none of my bolt has grown black feathers, nor the generation above me, and the ones below are still in their first moult, the baby plumage. In my Eyrie, not for a long time. Maybe we're blessed." "Then how do you know what they are, what they do?" "There are stories," Cadora said darkly. "Who tells them?" "The white Eyrie keeps the records." I would never be permitted access to those. They would not be for the likes of me. But I felt pity for the black-winged creatures who were driven out of their society to forage alone and fend for themselves, solitary and isolated in an entire world that revolved around families and kindreds. It seemed to me that the only way left for them was to kill, because their lives were otherwise empty of love or companionship. "Do they come to flight night?" I asked. Cadora reared back. "They would not be permitted," she said. "We would protect the fledglings from them. We would have to. That is our compact." Alone and not permitted to even the glorious abandon of flight night. To bear black wings was to be outcast and vilified and feared. Damned. I knew I would have to find them, to go looking for one of them, to hear their side of the story. I was sent as ambassador to all of this world after all. Cadora could not or would not tell me about how to go about seeking them. My household kill, who had withdrawn to give Cadora and myself the chance to speak in private, came for me not long after that, and I was escorted away from the house of the winged kill. I never saw Cadora again. Mobile Ambassador Gelman Gronabalas dispatches. She came out amongst them on flight night, the ambassador from another world. The kill who milled about beside her the bonfires, excited and more voluble than the ambassador had ever seen them, even offered her an occasional nod of recognition or greeting. They did not smile, the kill, but if they did, there might have been a smile for the ambassador that night. She had been amongst them for long enough for them to have learned her. She was curious and persistent and devoted to her duties, but she was also happy to learn and to abide by the rules. Or so they thought, until that night. When the winged ones came in from their migrations from the Eyries, the brown and the gold and the amber and the red, and even a handful of dignified solemn creatures from the white Eyrie, to whom there was extended deference rather than welcome, The fledulous kill flocked to them where they landed, and the two kindreds laughed and embraced and mingled and celebrated the night when the divided kill were once again one. Children taken from the arms of the women gathered here, come down from the skies to which they were given, to walk among their family of blood, the one kind to state their longing for the other, with all permitted, all allowed for that one night of the year. But she hung back, the ambassador, and she watched the skies. Long after everyone who might have been expected to come down from them had arrived, the ambassador stood by herself a little apart, watching the skies intently as though waiting for something. For a while they remembered noticing her, seeing her there, but then the bonfire burned brighter and Flight Night grew louder and merrier, and the kill lost sight of the ambassador and interest in her doings that night. By the time the bonfires had burned down and Flight Night was over and dawn was creeping over the horizon and painting the sea rose and gold, by the time they started waking, many hours later, the kill who had slept where they fell the night before, the ambassador was gone. They looked for her because they were responsible for her, and they would have to account for her to the people who had sent her, but she had disappeared completely. They shrugged helplessly the kill when they gathered up her papers and belongings and handed them over to her people after every search they could make had been completed. But they did not tell the outsiders. They barely spoke of it among themselves, of the thing that they had found by the edge of the sea, on a lonely part of the beach where none had gone to seek their delights on Flight Night. There had been footsteps in the sand just above the waterline, the tracks of those of the ambassador's sensible white-soled shoes, and where the footsteps ended, 3 long, sharp black feathers. The story behind the word. The anticipation of waiting for someone to come. Well, what about the discovery about the black-winged ones, and waiting in frustration until you could find out for yourself just how much of what you'd found out about them was actually true? Would you be outside, alone in the midst of a carnival, in the middle of a crowd which doesn't really know or care if you exist, waiting for that single someone who you're expecting, whom you want to see, someone whose coming you are almost afraid of, but which you find yourself anticipating with a strange, almost frightening thrill? Again, you may find that you'd have quite to whittle the sharp edges off this story peg to make it quite fit to this particular inspirational hole, as it were. But sometimes the fit doesn't have to be quite seamless for the idea to be put across. Sometimes the light of illumination needs those tiny gaps to shine through. Well, that was my gift to you on my birthday. I hope you enjoyed it. And at some point, sooner or later, maybe I can do some more reading, if necessary. In the meantime, the Black Wings.